Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you all for coming, and we appreciate it. This is a very good Modern War Institute Speaker Series event this afternoon. We have General Retired Michael Hayden. I will not even try to read the highlights of his long and extensive bio, but I will just mention a few things that are directly relevant to what we're talking today. He served as the director of the National Security Agency from 1999 to 2005, so was in that position during the attacks of 9/11. He became the first principal deputy director of national intelligence when he was awarded his 4th star in 2005, making him the highest ranking military intelligence officer in the armed forces. And of course, he served as the director of the Central Intelligence Agency from 2006 until his retirement from there in 2009. So in addition to this smaller afternoon event, he's also been kind enough to join us tonight for our showing of the movie Spy Masters, CIA in the Crosshairs, and to participate in a panel after that event. So I encourage you all to attend that as well. It's at 1930 in Robinson Auditorium. And with that, sir, we appreciate you taking so much of your time and joining us in this critical discussion about intelligence in the war on terror for America.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you all for coming. I'm just going to be really informal, and it's going to be interactive, all right? So you can take notes if you like, but I'm going to be listening to you as much as you're listening to me. When I called and said, hey, what do you want me to talk about? One of the things that was suggested was my book, which I'm very happy to talk about. And I remind you all, it's available in the bookstore and on Amazon, if any of you need to buy it. The book is called Playing to the Edge: American Intelligence in the Age of Terror. And so let me just, I usually do this over a longer period of time, 35, 40 minutes. I'm going to give you the executive summary of the book tour. All right, give you 12, 15 minutes of it. And then I would hope that just kind of sets the stage for what you want to talk about and maybe generate some questions and comments on your part. So generally when I go around and talk about the book, I do 3 things. All right, I say, why'd I do it? What's in there? And then how does a former director of this or that get to write a book and get it into the public domain, all right? So I'll do the why very quickly because I think it's really important for you to understand some critical questions about American intelligence. I teach at George Mason University in Northern Virginia. It's a course in the grad school there, Intelligence and Policy. And I actually begin every semester at the level of metaphysics, literally. I talk about Plato's parable of the cave. Okay, getting a couple of nods of recognition here. The fireplace, the travelers, the shadows, the voices. Can we know truth? And I let them kick that around for 20 or 30 minutes. Oh, yeah, we can know truth. The pursuit of truth is worthy. Good. All right. How about the secret pursuit of secret truth? How about that? How's that feel? And they kick that around. Yeah, that's a good thing, too. And then I mean, you can tell I'm kind of narrowing down here to tougher questions. And the question I get to next is, all right, so how about this? Is the secret pursuit of secret truth compatible with American democracy? Which, of course, bases an awful lot of government function on being transparent. And they kick that around for 20 minutes. I'm here to report that I don't know if I get the same kind of results here at the Military Academy, but I can tell you in Northern Virginia, talking to graduate students in a class being conducted by the former director of CIA, and knowing full well that I will give them their final grade, everyone so far has said, oh, yeah, the secret pursuit of truth is indeed compatible with American democracy. And then I get to the punchline. And here's the one I would share with you. It's not just compatible with, it's essential to. That America doesn't remain democratic without good, in all meanings of the word good, espionage services. I talk about 2 days after 9/11, I was director of NSA, and I gave a speech to the workforce. And I said things you would especially expect, kind of like, here's where we're going, here's the immediate task. I barked out TWAA, threat warning attack assessment, what happened, how that happened, anything more coming. And I emphasized we're playing defense. We'll play offense directly, but we're playing defense now. I thanked him for coming to work because, half that workforce at Fort Meade is, actually far more than half the workforce at Fort Meade is civilian, and a lot of family stress, and, more than one story of spouses throwing themselves on the hood of the car saying, don't go, don't go. And of course they did come, and I said, look on the bright side, I bet you there are 300 million Americans out there right now who wish they had your job. in response to the attack. And then I got to the punchline related to this essential to a democracy. I said, look, all free peoples have to balance their liberty and their safety, their privacy and their security. And we Americans, blessed by two really big oceans and two neighbors that frankly have been either friendly and or weak, have allowed us to tuck our flag way up here by privacy and liberty, and we don't have to push it way down towards security and safety. And I said the attacks 2 days ago put that at risk. So here's the plan. We are going to keep America free by making Americans feel safe again. And the underlying thought was frightened people don't make good Democrats or Republicans. Okay? Small d, small r in both places. Frightened people begin to gnaw first on their neighbors' liberties and privacy, and sooner or later, if they're very frightened enough, they start gnawing on their own. Our job, prevent that from happening. Keep the nation safe. So, first point, the why is espionage is essential to American democracy. Rarely has anything so essential to American democracy been so mis- or ununderstood by the population that it serves. And so my purpose is simply, well, let me show you what happens here. Let me kind of go up to the vault door, punch in the cipher lock, open the door, walk you in, introduce you to the folks who do this, and to the degree allowed by law and policy, let me show you what they do. And I've got friends of mine in government, in those three-letter agencies around town, they've given me the best compliment I've ever gotten on the book, which was, I actually see myself in your book. So to that degree, my attempt is, let me introduce you to these folks who do these things. I think I did okay. So that's the why. That's the why. The what, that's my wife Janine over here. All right. I got the manuscript done. I send it up to New York to Penguin. They said, we're going to edit a little bit. And oh, by the way, we need a title. I said, I never thought for a title. I'll get back to you. So we kind of thought about it over a weekend. The title, Playing to the Edge, is hers. She's the one who came up with the title because she had read the manuscript. And if you've looked at the book or heard about the book or maybe seen me on a talk show or something, I mean, the idea is we in the intelligence community, to do our duty, will use all the authorities that law and policy give us. When the book rolled out last February, CBS Sunday Morning did about a 7 or 8 minute spot on it. And we filmed the spot in my hometown of Pittsburgh at the Pittsburgh Steelers practice facility. Chapter 13 talks about my working with the Steelers, going through college and all. And we're at the practice facility walking down the sidelines, and David Martin, who was doing the interviewing, says, General, funny title for your book. What's the title mean? I said, well, David, you see this field here? It's 120 yards this way. It's 66 2/3 this way. By the way, the Steelers don't draw those lines. Okay? Those lines come from the league office. But now, Steelers, like any football team, are going to play inside that field. And frankly, they're going to use the whole field when the tactical situation demands it. For me, as director of NSA or CIA, not to use the whole field, okay, not to use the whole field, would be like an NFL team saying, you know, we want to be really careful this weekend. We are not going to run the ball outside the hash marks. I mean, our results would be about the same as an NFL team, all right? We wouldn't score. So we use the whole field. I take great pains to point out, we don't determine how big the field is. That is determined by the league office, the American political process. It comes from the president, it comes from the courts, it comes from the Congress, but then we use the field when circumstances demand it, all the way to the chalk line. By the way, when you do that, if you've got any experience in Washington, you know that you are guaranteeing that your future life will be less pleasant than it would otherwise have been. You're going to end up in some newspaper with some aggressive story and a whole bunch of people calling you, and sooner or later you're going to be in front of some congressional committee explaining yourself. But if you don't play out to the edges, if you play back in, you might be protecting yourself, or more nobly, you're protecting your agency. But we're not protecting you. We're not protecting the population. So we play all the way out to the edge. Just because, and Major read my background, you know, NSA, DNI, CIA, just because of my personal background, I have deep personal fingerprints on every controversial program we have begun since 9/11. and I'll go through this more quickly because you're a far more well-informed audience than I normally talk to. That whole NSA surveillance thing, Stellar Wind, post 9/11, metadata, 215 program, that's me. I did that. All right? We launched that on October 2nd, 2001. And if it interests you how we did that and why we did that, it's in the book, but I can talk about it in the Q&A. I didn't start renditions, detentions, interrogations. I inherited that, but I had that program was waiting for me when I got to CIA, and I changed it. I really did. I narrowed it down. I think I put it under a stronger legal and political underpinning. No criticism of George Tenet and Porter Goss. They had their circumstances, I had mine. But we spent the summer of '06 not ending the program, but like I said, we had, well, to be specific, there used to be 13 techniques. By the time we were done, there were 6. To be specific, before I got there, we apprehended someone, they were forever. I said forever is 60 days. All right, if you want 120, but do you understand what I'm saying? It was in 60-day increments. Okay, so unless I made a positive decision to keep someone more than 60, they would go out of our custody. Oh yeah, by the way, we took no one in that we didn't already have an exit plan for. All right, so when I got there, we had people we had held for several years, and I made the argument to the president, Mr. President, we're the nation's intel service. We are not the nation's jailers. And we have got to devise a system whereby we get intelligence from these detainees, but we don't keep them forever. So, lots of my fingerprints on rendition. By the way, depending on how you count, CIA held in the history of the program 119 people. All right, it can be as low as 99, it can be as high as 130. And I'm not talking about ghost prisoners or people off the book. I'm just saying it's how you count them, it's how you book them. Is that a detainee, or are you merely transferring that person to another government? How long do you have to keep him before he counts on your books? And anyway, the generally accepted number is about 119 now. I had 2. Okay, I emptied the camps in Labor Day weekend 2006. All right, and we actually made it public that we had these people. Subsequently to that, we captured 2 additional people. But I have become, this might actually be part of your professional development here, all right? I felt duty-bound, even though almost all of this program happened before I arrived. I think it's a fair judgment to the degree you follow this in the public domain. I'm the face defending this program. I had 2. Porter and George had 117. But I felt it my duty, since I was the one in charge when this became more public and more a political issue, that it was my responsibility to defend what my agency had done, even if I had not had a personal hand in it. Third controversial program, so you got surveillance, renditions, detentions, interrogations, targeted killing. And there is a long chapter in the book about CIA convincing the Bush administration to really push the yoke forward on targeted killing. We spent the first half of 2008 convincing the administration that we were getting pre-9/11 Afghanistan light in the tribal region of Pakistan, that we were seeing training camps, safe areas, people coming in for training, people leaving for training, people like you, Westerners, coming in and leaving, graduating classes and so on. I never said what I'm going to say to you now to President Bush or Vice President Cheney, but it's a pretty good summary. Mr. President, knowing what we know now, there will be no excusing or explaining our inaction after the next attack. And in July of 2008, President Bush agreed, pushed the yoke way forward on targeted killings, and you see a real spike as we go after Al-Qaeda leadership in the tribal region of Pakistan, to great effect, by the way. And there's an extensive passage in the book quoting letters to and from bin Laden that had been made public about the effects of the targeted killing program on Al-Qaeda. It did everything we promised the president it would do. Okay, so there's a lot more in the book, but the title is tied to the controversial programs and playing to the edge. I do have to tell you that, with a title like that and controversial, and I understand fairly controversial programs. The line I use is, you don't have to be wearing tinfoil on your head to have concerns about some of these things. I mean, good, solid thinking Americans say, well, I'm not so sure about that one, Hayden. I get that. So I expected, going out on the tour, playing to the edge, that I would spend most of the book tour kind of in a rope-a-dope here in a defensive crouch, defending why we had been so aggressive. Turns out I need not do that. My book tour was, by happenstance, synchronized with the presidential campaign. And there was a particular candidate out there who was saying, we're going to waterboard and a hell of a lot more, to quote him. And someone said, we're not just going to kill terrorists, we're going to kill terrorist families. All right? And so out there pushing a book from a former director of CIA called Playing to the Edge, rather than being defensive, I actually spent more time explaining to audiences, you know, there are edges. You know, there are points beyond which we should not go. I was on Bill Maher out in Hollywood on a Friday night, and he said, you know, Mr. Trump says we're going to kill terrorist families. And I go, no, we're not. He says, well, what do you mean? I said, hey, if ever such an order is issued, the first time it hits a man or a woman in an American military uniform, he or she is going to turn to the issuer and say, I'm sorry, sir, that's just not going to happen. And he said, you talking about mutiny here? I said, no. I said, we know the laws of armed conflict. There is no way the intentional killing of family members satisfies U.S. law, international law, the laws of armed conflict. We are not going to do it. Okay? And that actually became a thing. I mean, I didn't plan for it. He asked the question, I answered the question the way any of you would have answered, because that's the thing you're taught your first semester here about the laws of armed conflict, and that's just not what we do. It actually caused a disturbance in the political force. It became a highly commented on interlude. By the way, when I got all done, and any of you watched Bill Maher, when I got all done, you know, the applause light comes on, and you get the, and he actually leans into me and said, by the way, General, we really do appreciate what you guys do. I had the thought, louder, Bill, speak into the microphone and get that out there for international audiences. So that's kind of the what. And there's a lot more in the what, but you know, we can talk about it later. The how. I'll be pretty brief. Everything I write's got to be cleared. All right? And so the research begins with me just like you writing a paper, or at least the way I used to write a paper. Just sit down and write something. It's always easier to work with something than it is to stare at the blank page. You know what I mean? Get something down. So I would take the iPad on the long flights. I do a lot of travel in the post-government life, cross an ocean, cross a continent, bring the iPad, start writing. All right, and I'd pick a topic. There's a whole chapter in the book on a place called El Kabar, which is a Syrian nuclear reactor the Israelis destroyed in September of '07. And I'd just start typing about El Kabar. And I'd be a little careful here, right? I mean, I just can't be putting things I know to be secret in there. So I'm pretty cautious because, you know, I'm going to leave that iPad in a hotel room in Frankfurt or something, and you can't, that's not right. So I'd be very cautious. And after 2 or 3 flights, I'd have 2,000 or 3,000 words about El Kabar and big gaps in my knowledge. And I'd call up the old agencies and say, hey, I need to come by and check my files about this, or I want to check my files from this period. And oh, by the way, I'd like to talk to him and him and him and him. And then they would arrange it. And then they'd literally back a dolly up with the boxes of those files and drop them there, and I just do that, going through the files. It actually was it's really kind of fun. It's like being in your grandparents' attic or something, you know, and you're going through there on a Thanksgiving or Christmas holiday and say, whoa, how come these records are so big, you know? 33 1/3. They know it, you don't understand. I came across one memo. I talk to President Bush every Thursday morning about covert action and sensitive collection. And late '07, maybe early '08, we told him we're not doing real well tracing down this bin Laden guy, but we got a new theory. We are confident he's working through a courier. We have flooded the zone so much trying to detect this kind of stuff. We know he's not doing it, but we do know he's communicating. It's got to be a courier. We think we got a lead, and then we began building it. I came across a file in one of these big boxes from December of 2008. So the election's already over. President-elect is ready to come on stage. President Bush is going out the door. In December of 2008, I come across my notes for a Thursday morning briefing in which we are able to tell the President of the United States that the courier we're chasing is Abu Ahmed al-Kuwaiti. And that was the guy that eventually took us to Abbottabad. And, you know, people built from that and move forward. So it was kind of interesting to, kind of go through the old file. Oh man, I forgot all about that one. And you pull that up. And then I got to talk to the people, all right? In the credits, the acknowledgments to the book, I talked to 70 people, more than 70. 2 refused to speak with me. Both were CIA. One was the current head of the Counterterrorism Center, and one was the previous head of the Counterterrorism Center. And I frankly have to admit, that's not a bad thing for the head of the Counterterrorism Center saying, we don't talk to anybody writing a book, even somebody we know. But most other folks talk to me. And that was actually a wonderful experience. These were people who kind of were in the bunker. We're all together, and we got to share. And I'm retired, and time has moved on. So you can say a little bit more of what was in your heart at the time than you may have felt able to say at the time. And so that was just a wonderful exchange. So I'd take notes on the documents, I'd take notes on the interview, and then I would have to give the notes to my handler from CIA or NSA. And they would take them away because they then had to scrub them for security concerns. Then 4, 5, 6 weeks later, they would call, say, General, we're all done. Why don't you come on down and pick up what's left of your notes from our security review? And I would come and get what they had let slide through. And I'd marry it up then with all that stuff on the iPad. And then, once you've done that, you're kind of 80, 85, you all write papers, you're kind of 80, 85% there. Now you give it to someone to kind of take a look at. You get a new idea, you do a little sandpapering, do a little more research, and pretty soon you're shooting for score. You're above 90, 95% complete. So when you get it all done, when you get all the chapters done, you got to give it back to them again. And then NSA, CIA, the DNI, and the Department of Defense had to review my book. And it took about half a year to get it through. I'll just simply say that everything I thought I could talk about and tell you is actually in the book. There are some things I never even attempted to write about it, and there's no way that should be told, and I'm not telling it. And everything else I thought I should say, I finally got approved. Little sandpaper on that edge here, a little adjustment over here. There was one incident in NSA where I talked about the rapid growth of a particularly important office, and I said within a year it had grown by 1,400 people, or it had grown to 1,400 people. And they said, oh, you can't say that, you can't say that. I said, well, what can I say? Why don't you say it grew to more than 1,000? Okay, I can live with that. CIA actually took one big chunk and said, we're going to let you keep it in, but you can't keep it in that chapter. You got to move it over to another chapter. It was just kind of, and you're doing nuclear physics, if you put them too close, you're starting to get critical mass with the number of neutrons or something. But if you put it over here, we'll let it ride. So I did. By the way, that makes for transition hell. All right, that stuff's over here where it shouldn't be. So by the way, if you read the book and the transitions don't seem smooth, not my fault. Okay, done by CIA or done for CIA. Like I said though, everything I thought I should talk about, I did. They let me, and I felt very, very good about that. One final point, and we'll go to Q&A. One of the things that Janine and I get to do is in our post-government life is this. We come talk to you. We're going to sit here with the cyber folks and the CT folks in a little bit. We're going to do the movie event tonight with Jules Naudet, one of the producers, and the New York City firemen, and that's just great. We get to go to a lot of things. We tell the story that we were actually invited to the Washington premiere of the first episode of the second season of Homeland. Okay, and it was in the Corcoran Gallery, which is just near the White House. So we went and we saw the premiere of the first episode of season 2, and then there was a party afterwards with the cast, the actors and the producers and a lot of people like me, kind of the DC crowd. And I walked up to Mandy Patinkin, who plays Saul in Homeland, and said, Mr. Patinkin, hi, I'm Mike Hayden. I used to play the director of CIA too. And as an actor, really dedicated to his craft. I mean, that was just lights. Really, let's talk. And he wanted to get. So we got to go to another event. This one was the premiere of a series not nearly as popular as Homeland. It was called Turn. Turn, yeah. All right. It's about the Culper spy ring on Long Island. All right. Actually, season 3 ended right over here. Now, they filmed it in Virginia, but it ended over here with the capture of Benedict Arnold. Okay? All right. So it's about the Culper spy ring. And so we went there, and it's fine. It's not Homeland, but it's not bad. And I got to be on a panel afterwards, like we're going to do tonight for Spy Masters. And I was on the panel with the historian on whose genuinely authentic work the screenplay was based. I think producer or director, and then a couple of actors, and chit-chat back and forth. And I get asked, what do you think? I said, oh, I loved it. Of course, they were happy to hear that. But the moderator said, well, why do you like it so much? I said, it shows that American espionage is as old as America. It shows that the nation's first spy master was the man who became the nation's first president and its first SINC, Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Army. I said, this is baseball and apple pie. All right, this is core to who we are. We have been doing this since we have been. And then I went through my whole shtick about not just compatible with our democracy, but essential to our democracy. I've already told you that part and how that all worked. The neat thing is, this premiere wasn't at the Corcoran. This premiere was at the National Archives and in the theater of the National Archives. And so I was doing this essential to, not just compatible with, but essential to, about 135 feet from the Constitution, and about 155 feet from a copy of the Magna Carta. And back to my original theme, why did I do this? This is an essential task for a free people to stay free. Not just safe, but to stay free. And that's why I wrote the book. Okay, I've taken up enough of your space. Oh my, that didn't take long to go.
Austin Willard, so I've got a couple questions for you. Kind of going back full circle to what you briefed at the beginning. You said it's important for these secret agencies to not just stay secret, but to also be good. How in a democratic society do you maintain agencies that are good without the ability to have oversight from the public, given their secret nature?
Yeah, so and I spend the last 50 pages of the book kind of, tough question. So let me give you a long answer, all right? But I think, given the academic background of you folks, I think it's one that's quite valuable. So if I say the 215 program, does that strike a bell with anyone? That's all the metadata of your phone bills and mine that NSA had. I told you, I started that in October 2001. President Obama hugged it like a teddy bear, despite running on not being George Bush. When he became in the office and got briefed, he kept most of the programs. He stopped some, but he kept most, which kind of suggests to me, okay, we're roughly getting it about right, because you have two very different presidents kind of saying, yeah, still good to go. When Snowden's revelations pushed the 215 program out the door, all right, and that's the first story that came out. Yeah. NSA's got all your phone bills. Actually, it didn't come out that plainly. It was NSA's got all your phone calls, which is not true at all. It's quite a different dynamic, all right? The government was very flat-footed in their response, all right? Now, part of that was, frankly, a political decision from the White House. Part of it, though, was I think that the intel community, let me just say NSA, NSA was back-footed by the popular, you're doing what? I mean, there was an awful lot of stir when that story hit. Now, again, part of it was the story came out in the ugliest possible way, and part of it is the government didn't explain itself very well. But part of it is that NSA thought they were cool, all right? Because the 215 program, all right, 215 program had been authorized not by one, but by two presidents, quite different presidents in personality. It actually had been legislated by the Congress. The two oversight committees were all in on it. In fact, after it really hit the fan, the most powerful defenders of 215 were actually the intel committees, not the White House, which is kind of like, what's that, all right? So authorized by two presidents, legislated by Congress, overseen by the intelligence committees, and oh yeah, every 60 days they got a check off from the FISA court. All right, we talk about the details of FISA. But from the NSA's point of view, it was, whoa, hey, whoa, how could anybody object? This is the Madisonian trifecta. I got the executive, the legislative, judicial, they're all signed up. This was done precisely the way it was supposed to have been done based on the reforms of the intelligence community in the 1970s after the whole Church Pike and investigations and so on. I mean, NSA literally is going, check, 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 we're good. And what happened, and now I'm getting really to the very core of your question, what happened is an awful lot of Americans, and again, back to my point, not all of them were in tinfoil, all right? A lot of really solid Americans saying, you know what? I get what you just told me, Hayden, but I'm not so sure that constitutes consent of the governed anymore. I'm thinking that might be consent of the governors. In other words, you told them, but you didn't tell me. And that's where we are, okay? And thank you for asking the question. That is precisely where we are now in the relationship of American espionage with America. How much of what it is American espionage does it have to tell the American people in order to get the sanction and the legitimacy of the American people without telling the American people so much that it's not worth doing in the first place because I ain't figured out how to tell the American people without telling everybody else.
So sort of a follow-up, do you think that feeling among American people is exacerbated by having sort of a class of Washington elites who sort of stay there perennially and are very distant from the population they're supposedly supposed to represent?
I don't know that, all right? And I get the macro issue you're describing, and yeah, that's probably true. On the micro issue, I just don't know. So I've been, book tour, and I do a lot of talk, not just for the books. And I actually find, not even on balance, I just mean routinely, most Americans go, yeah, you're good. I like what you're doing. And so I actually think it might be a little reverse of what you're saying. All the gas is coming from elites, not from the broader population. As we say quite arrogantly, we elitists in DC, once you get beyond Manassas, everything's okay. Okay? Because you start running into, just everyday folks who want to be safe. All right? It doesn't trivialize the issue, though. It is a really important issue. And if you read the book, again, the last 50 pages, I'm actually telling my old guys, you just got to say more. You've got to put more out there. Otherwise, you're going to lose legitimacy, and they're going to take the stuff away from you. And you're not going to be able to do your task. And so I'm actually a more forward-leaning sort of folk. There's still a lot of people in the community. I mean, the community generally likes what people like me or Mike Morrell has been another one who's gone out there, Mike Leiter, former head of the Counterterrorism Center. I mean, pretty articulate people who kind of know how this works and kind of calm down. Whoa, no, that's not what they're doing. Let me explain to you, all right? Generally, we're popular within our old tribe, but there's a fraction of our old tribe says, even you guys shouldn't be out there. We shouldn't talk to anybody about this. And I just don't think that's, Am I enthusiastic about that? Probably not. But I recognize we cannot attempt to change American political culture to make our life easier. We have got to adapt as well as we can within the broader culture. And the broader culture right now is, you got to tell me more stuff. So that's kind of where we are. Thank you, though. That's a great question. Yeah.
Sir, Tim Delahunty, I have a question. I was just wondering, as far as with the recent, just technological changes that we've seen in the past 21st century, how has that affected our ability to operate clandestinely in places like Syria or something like that? I was watching some videos yesterday, and definitely some information, some stuff that probably shouldn't have been in the news. Has that affected our ability? How would we get there?
Yeah, it cuts both ways, and I guess what I've got to tell you is that climate changes, adapt to the climate. Don't sit there and complain. It's colder than it used to be, then die of frost. Adapt. Things change. Things always change. So in what you just asked, more information is retrievable electronically than it ever has been before. The good news is that really helps spying. The bad news is that really makes it hard to prevent leaks. So you play the game. In the last 15 years, and I say it in the book, this is a golden age of electronic surveillance. Things your parents used to keep at least in the desk drawer at home, you're keeping in your phone. All right? So somebody like me going, excellent. All right? No, not you, but adversaries of the United States. I like that. All right. Now, what's happening is a lot of people like you around the globe are going, man, that's really stupid keeping that stuff in the phone. I think why don't I encrypt it? And you've seen the last round, Tim Cook, Apple, Jim Comey, FBI. Can we break the encrypt? So now people are actually making it harder to steal their information. Good for you, good for me, good for America. Tougher for NSA, because that's a global trend. So what are you going to do, whine about it? Going to pass a law that nobody can have encryption? Good luck with that. Okay? It's just going to happen. And so now you've got to adjust. What are the adjustments? One adjustment is metadata. That phone you got that's really good and now encrypted is chugging out digital exhaust like it was a diesel truck in the 1940s that can be collected and which can, in the hands of an intelligence service, be turned into actionable information, even though we never ever get to read your mail. Okay? Oh no, yeah, maybe we need more human spies now. I mean, so it's just an adjustment. It's not, and it's not at the end of espionage life as we know it. It's just we're now going to adjust to the new circumstances. I'll give you another one, right? Significantly more of the information we now need to provide a decision maker, particularly at the policy level, the political level, significantly more of that information now no longer needs to be stolen. It's just sitting out there, given the global information age. Okay, and so intelligence will be well advised to make sure they have to steal stuff before they try. Make sure that it's not already available in this ocean of information that we create every day. So again, it's just adjustment that has to be made. Some other questions? Yeah.
Sir, Cadet Clark, how did your military career in military intelligence help you with successes in the NSA and the CIA?
Yeah, so NSA is half military, all right? So the 35,000 people in NSA, it is right down the middle. It is 50-50 GI civilian. Now, if you go to Fort Meade, you wouldn't believe it, all right? Fort Meade is overwhelmingly civilian, but and only about half the NSA workforce works at Fort Meade. It's overwhelmingly civilian. Half the NSA workforce works at somewhere other than Fort Meade, and guess what? It's overwhelmingly GI, all right? So I'm kind of in this fish and fowl world at Fort Meade. So Fort Meade NSA is in the Department of Defense. Its chain of command comes through the Secretary of Defense. The director of NSA has always been a uniformed military officer. May change soon, but right now, always been. And so that was not an unfamiliar environment for me. All right, now I had to recognize I gotta half my workforce here is civilian, and frankly, they're not the kind of civilians that probably raise their hand to come to West Point or Annapolis or Colorado Springs. All right, they're very scientific. And I know I'm not talking about your academic background. It is an incredibly introverted workforce. Let me just put it that way. All right, like this is a very old joke, and I told it at lunch, so I'm going to repeat it now. What's an extroverted NSA? That's someone who looks at your shoes while he's talking to you rather than his own shoes. Okay. And so you have, as a question of leadership, all right, which is things you're trying to make better here, perfect for yourself. It's a question of leadership. You got to know, right? It's not the same. Even if you have been a brigade commander, the force you're attempting to motivate and lead is different in character. Now you come over here to CIA. It's all civilian. Now I will say that CIA is the most militarized civilian organization of which I've ever been a part. That service before self, group over individual, commitment to mission, obsession with the task, jag, just like us, okay? The one thing that CIA does not get, however, is what you and I have been comfortable with, and that's a hierarchy, all right? CIA is flat. CIA directors are routinely called by their first name by everybody. So you can imagine, in the campaign to retake the Philippines, some 03 comes in and says, well, what do you think, Doug? Okay. That's what would happen if MacArthur had been the director of CIA. All right? My first encounter with the workforce. So I came into the agency, it was a troubled time. Porter Goss, who was a dear friend, and he had just hit whitewater in trying to help the agency. CIA was getting beaten up in the press. 9/11, weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, a couple Pulitzer Prizes for detention and interrogation stories, and just getting slapped around. And so the president asked me to take over. You know how the president asks, you will take over? Yes, yes, sir. So I got sworn in by the vice president after I was confirmed by the Senate. We had a formal ceremony. President Bush came out later, but sworn in by the vice. Went up the GW Parkway to Langley, went in, had my first meeting. All right? Have you ever seen pictures of Langley, you know, that you see in the movies? There's a big golf ball looking thing off to the right. That's called the bubble. That is the agency auditorium. All right, and it seats about 400 and change. I mean, they're hanging from the rafters. I mean, who is this new guy wearing a uniform? Coming from the hated DNI. Michael told you I was the principal deputy director of national intelligence. They would have been more welcoming if I was coming from the FSB or the KGB. Okay. So I walk in, I have my first town hall meeting, and what do I say? I said, number one, nobody sent me up here to blow anything up. All right, so I tell you what, blow into the paper bag, get your CO2 levels back to where they are, and go back to work. This stuff is over. I don't think I said stuff, but I said it was over. I said, I'll work everything beyond the fence line. You work it inside the fence line. You're the best in the world at what you do. Just go do it. Okay, so that was my approach. And then I go to Q&A after 20, 30 minutes. And near the end of the Q&A, somebody way in the back asks, yeah, son, what do you got? And I'm on stage. I'm in my blues. All right, four ribbons, name, badges. Okay. Yeah, son, what do you got? Yeah, what do we call you? Okay, what do we call you? And I paused. I said, you probably can tell I'm reasonably comfortable up here in front of an audience. I wasn't expecting that one. And my answer was, whatever makes you feel right, son. And it turns out that was the pass-fail question in the test. I left the bubble, got an underground passage to the old headquarters building, walked into my first staff meeting. My whole staff is there. They're talking back and forth, chit-chat, and I walk in, and absolutely nothing changes. Everybody talks, chit-chats, no tin hut, no ladies and gentlemen, the director, no, and I go, okay, let's start. And we all sit down, and I go, I didn't hire any of you people. If that's a problem for you, you've got 48 hours to tell me. Otherwise, you're mine, and I expect you to act like you're mine. And then we went on to the rest of the agenda. So what had I done in the two sessions? I had hugged them as they were. I made no claim that I'm the white knight coming in on horseback to save the day. I told them, I love you as you are. You're good as what you are. I'm going to protect you as your director, and we're going to go do good things. And I said it in one way to the rank and file, and another way to the leadership. Two and a half folks came in and said, I don't want to work for you. It wasn't personal. It was one had just been hired by Porter. They were a friend of Porter Goss and said, I'm going to go do something. Yeah, fine. I mean, but everyone else stayed. And then everyone else acted like they were mine. Since we're here at the Military Academy, I'll continue on the leadership theme, right? So we grew attached. Leader and led, director and workforce. Now last year, this is early 2008, we had some things going on in Afghanistan that were kind of on the edge, all right? It wasn't that you would have objected to what we were doing. It just was, are we right within the specific instruction we've been given? I can't go into all the details, but just modestly, not everyone, we did not have authority to do some things to all the bad people in Afghanistan, only some bad people. And the rule was, what were we doing? Might we be using our authorities against people who are unarguably bad, but might be slightly out of the framework of our authorities. So we're having this big meeting. We had a CT meeting every Monday and Wednesday. And I mean, it was operational, 30, 40 people in the room. And they're going back and forth, 15, 20 minutes. Yes, no, maybe, I don't know. What? And finally, I made eye contact. I'll do it with you. I made eye contact with the head of SAD, the Special Activities Division, paramilitary force. And I did this. And he went. 36 hours later, he was in Kabul. 72 hours later, he's back in my office. He walked in and said, "Boss, we're fine. Thanks." That was it. That's total communication. And again, I think that that sounds too self-referential, and I don't mean to be self-praising, but I was just trying to describe that I felt that the only way I could succeed was to establish a relationship with the workforce of this intense loyalty and trust. And truly, I never said anything to him. I just went, and he went. It was done. When I went to Corona, which is the Air Force 3- and 4-star meeting, I got invited once a year. It was Corona Fall. We do it at the Air Force Academy when either you or Navy there playing for the weekend. Invariably, I was Air Force 4-star, but I wasn't on the Air Force books. I was outside of, even the Secretary of Defense could not direct me. Right? But out of courtesy, as a career Air Force guy, they invited me. So it was great. And one of the questions I got was, what's it like leading all those civilians? Same question you asked. And I said, and my answer was, you know that stuff you learned worked when you were a squadron commander? Yeah, still works. Hey, others? Nope, yo, I'm sorry, yeah.
So you in passing raised two issues, one of trust and one of the FSB. And so my question is, well, you talk about espionage being essential to the maintenance of democracy. In what ways can it be used, or is it currently being used to undermine faith in democracy?
Sure. So we're talking about the DNC hack and the Russians. So let me lay down a series of facts as I believe them to be. The Russians did it. All right. And thank God our government a week ago said the Russians did. I mean, we all knew, but for some reason they just, come on, just say it. So the Russians did it. Now, I did this on Charlie Rose this morning. I actually said, by the way, that hack, that's honorable state espionage. Okay? If I had the ability to hack into the accounts of a major political party in a global adversary, oh man, I'd be on that. That's what we do. All right? Okay. What's different is then the Russians went beyond espionage and then weaponized the information. All right? That's different. All right? That's frankly, if it's just stealing DNC data, my only comment is shame on the DNC. But it's beyond that. All right? Now the Russians are using the data. And here, I'm pretty adamant about this. They're just messing with our heads. All right? They are not trying to pick a winner. They really aren't. I think even Putin knows that's just too hard. He cannot predict how those emails carry inside the American political system. I said on Charlie Rose this morning, I said, you realize, actually it was Nora O'Donnell, so you realize, Nora, both parties are going to this event for their talking points. Right? You got the Republicans saying, look at all this ugly stuff in the email. And you got the Democrats saying, look what the Russians did. All right? And so my sense is even Putin realizes this is going to bounce around. And frankly, I think that's what he wants it to do. He's not trying to get her unelected or him elected. He's messing with our heads because he thinks we do this to him. And that's, I think, a really important point. He blames the Maidan Square on us. He thinks the demonstrations after United Russia won the parliamentary elections he thought we did that in the streets of Moscow. He's convinced I did the Orange and Rose Revolution. All right? All right? Let me let you in on this is my self-criticism session at the re-education camp, all right? This is me going back over my career at CIA. If I had a problem with Russia, it was inattention. Janine and I went to more than 50 countries during my time as director of CIA. Not one of those countries was the Russian Federation. And that I'm telling you, I should have. Not just to keep the lines of communication open, just to have dialogue with FSB and SVR, which would have been beneficial. Putin thinks, however, I spent most of my waking moments figuring out how to go like this to him and to his party. And so I think that's generating a lot of what they're doing. We don't, I mean, you know, this is not my excusing it. In fact, again, I'll just replay what I said on Charlie Rose this morning. He said, so how should we respond to this cyber attack? My first response was, well, first of all, Charlie, you're putting in the wrong box. Do not drop this in the cyber box. Drop this in the Russia box. And now put it in there with all the other stuff Russia is doing. And then devise a response. He said, well, what kind of response? I said, well, you could give the Ukrainians more arms. You get a little more robust on what you're doing in Syria and kind of push the Russians out of some airspace. I'll give you one. Why don't you make it the policy of the United States government that within 10 years, we're going to wean Western Europe off of Russian gas? Okay? By the way, we got gas. Okay? And we're going to make a massive national investment project for LNG and LNG ports, and we're going to sell it to our Europeans. How's that, Vlad? And you see what I'm saying? We've got tools, but you can't use them if you just confine this as, well, we got a cyber issue with the Russians. And I went on to complain about the lack of response to all the things Russians for the last 3 or 4 years. Any others?
So they've got about 4 minutes until they have to move on.
All right, I promise to be very brief, but someone's got one more left. Otherwise, I want to thank you for being here. Yes, go ahead, sir.
Can you talk a little bit about your conversation with Hayden and what like really annoys you when you watch Homeland, and what did they get right?
Okay, so here's my summary of Homeland. By the way, I love Homeland, all right? We do. Everything in the foreground's wrong, all right? I mean, you pull a cell phone out of Langley, you're going to be pulling your nose out of the concrete floor, all right? Somebody's going to spread eagle you down there, and, all right? Everything in the background is correct, all right? That kind of obsession with mission, that focus, that dedication, and to a certain extent, that them versus us mystique. It's us, nobody else knows us except us. That's all very, very, very true. And so I'm glad Homeland is on. By the way, they spend a lot of time talking to people like me. It's not the only conversation I've had with Homeland. And there are a lot of people like me talk to Homeland. I mean, we sit in offices in D.C. for hours with their producers and writers just asking us questions. All they want to do, I mean, they're going to go write their story. I mean, and you know, they're going to be as dramatic as they need to be. But what they want to do is they want to understand the departure point. They want to understand, well, what's it really like? And several of us have been very generous. I mean, unrewarded, other than we like the TV show. And we don't do it for money. They're really interested. Good. We're really interested in talking to you, and we just talk them through to try to give it as much authenticity as it has. And by the way, if you scroll through all the things they've got to do for drama, all right, there's a lot of truth embedded in the plot lines. And so it's actually a very popular series. There was a line in last season's show that I now know, I did not know at the time, but I now know was developed based on these dialogues I'm telling you. All right, it wasn't my dialogue, it was someone else's. It's when, God, who's the guy we think is dead but is not really dead? No, Quinn, thank you, Quinn. Quinn comes back as a CIA case officer, having been in Syria, and he's at a staff meeting, and the guy from the White House, he says, well, thanks for all your service, Quinn. We need to know how the strategy is working in Syria. And the line that they got from CIA people who were going to talk to him, the line that they used was, what strategy? Okay, so yeah, I enjoy it very much. All right, you got to go back to school. Thank you very much for coming.